All right, guys, so this is where it all starts coming together. This is why I had to teach you that math, so you can understand how evolution actually works. For this first lecture, I'm not going to ask you to write a whole bunch of notes down on this one. This is one to just listen to, get the historical perspective, understand the background. Next mini lecture, that's where I'm going to really delve into the scientific principles, but this one's all about how we got there. This is a little bit of why arts and humanities is so important to biology, because you don't understand context without that people background. Speciation is important, and it didn't just start at Charles Darwin. Today, speciation is important because it's not just that is this thing, that is a turtle, that is a dolphin, the end. There's a lot going on with speciation that has actual economic consequences. And we're going to get into some of those, but you can patent organisms now. And when you do that, you can make a lot of money. In order to patent something, though, you need to show it's different from something else. Historically, though, we were really just interested in classifying things for the sake of classifying. So you have to ask yourself, what is a species? You've all freaking heard of a species before. You've used the word. You've talked about them. This is a species, that's a species. You know it. You look at it, you're like, all right, well, that's a plant. That's a different species than I am. You know that, don't you? But how? In the earliest works of science, so way, way back, we're talking ancient Greek philosophers. They were talking about species even then. And they said a species is individual organisms that represent a group of similar organisms. That is, it looks like a dog. I'm sorry, that thing has 4 legs, barks, we'll call it a dog. That thing has 4 legs and barks, we'll call it a dog. There's our species. Today, this is the modern definition of a species, right? A group of related organisms that maintains a distinctive set of attributes. Quite literally, they say the same thing. This has not changed in thousands of years. So, I want to talk about philosophy. Specifically, this guy named Plato. Plato put forth some ideas that were known as the Platonic forms. You guys ever read The Republic by Plato? Raise your hand if you have. Like 2 of you. Good. Here's the deal. There are a few books that are considered must-reads if you're an educated person. Do you guys have any idea what some of those books might be?
Any Shakespeare books?
Shakespeare, one. Yeah, Complete Works of William Shakespeare. That's one of them. What's another? Yeah.
Any type of huge religious text.
Yeah, exactly. Huge religious text. The King James Version of the Bible, especially because it's written in verse. The Aeneid, that's another one. The Iliad, the Odyssey. Plato's Republic. Those are going to be sort of the foundation of Western society. All of them. Okay, so in Plato's Republic, he put out this idea of the form. We have in our heads this idea of what something is. And I've talked about this before, but this is a chair. Let me bring this out here. Behold the chair. Everybody good on this is a chair? We can all agree. This is definitely. What is it?
It's a rolling chair.
Okay, this is a rolling chair. Everybody good on that? We can agree? Okay. How do you know it's a chair?
You can sit on it?
Yeah, so you define it by its function. You can sit on this. This is a chair because I sit on it. So I can sit on this chair right here. Is this a chair?
I mean,
Well, I'm sitting on it.
it could be a chair.
It could be a chair, but other people might call this a table. Heck. What's this?
A recycling.
A recycling bin. Can I sit in it?
Oh my God.
Look, you can totally sit in it, right? It's a chair now, as we've defined it functionally. Is there another way to define a chair?
Something that
It's got short and 4 legs. So does a dog. Dog and a chair are both chairs.
it's got a 90-degree angle.
It's got a back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's got a back to it. The table doesn't have a back. What if it was longer? It'd be a bench then, right? Is a bench a chair?
Yeah.
Is a chair a bench? Oh, man. Beanbag chairs don't have a back to them, but they're still chairs. Why? Because you sit on them, like you sit on the table. But you look at some... Okay, let's just imagine this so I don't have to sit on me. What if this had no back to it? It's a stool. What if it was higher, though?
It's a bar stool.
That's where you guys went. I was thinking table, but bar stool works. Yeah, okay, bar stool. So you got a stool. What's the difference between a stool and a table? This table here is a 4-leg, just like that.
Bigger chair.
It's a bigger chair. And flat.
You eat off of a table.
And you people have sat down with a chair in front of you and eaten off it like a table, haven't you? Oh, right. I do not believe. I know for sure that I'm just like when my wife's not home, and I need to have food out and I want to watch TV or something. I'm like, here's a chair. I'll just set that in front of me, and my ramen in front on that because I'm not cooking anything special. Or the other great big place to eat is over the sink. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the idea of the Platonic form. You have in your mind the ideal image of a chair. And you compare every other object to that. And then you get into this whole idea of speech shaping thought and this, that, and the other. It's crazy. But we know what a chair is because we have defined in our brains what a chair is. Does that make sense? We just know. We look at something and say, that's a chair, that's not a chair. That's a chair, that's a bench, whatever. So Plato laid that out for us and said, we just know. I just like it, okay? From Plato, we get Aristotle. Aristotle identified the words genus and species. Because Plato said you can classify things. What Plato was going for, by the way, was not chairs. Plato was going for, there are different types of people, there are 3 types of people. The rulers, the workers. 1, 2, okay, I know there was silver, gold, and brass. But I forget what the brass ones did. So there were 3 distinct groups of people. But Aristotle went further. He's like, not just people. There are different things of everything. Let's look at the whole world. We've got this one big substance. This is called the genus, or the general. And that's broken into 2 classifications, body and spirit. All right. Then you look at body, because you can't do much with spirit after that. So you look at body, you break body into living things and non-living things. And you break living things into plants and animals. And then animals get broken down into man and beast, people and everything else. And that's going to be a lot of thought on speciation for a very long time. It's the idea that humans are super special because we are. And then there's everything else. And they call that the infirma species, or the specific. So we have genus, the general, and species, the specific. Again, I would like to point out, I always find this hilarious, because genus is not a Greek word. It's a Latin word. Don't know how that happened. These early philosophers all thought that everything had a vital life essence to it. This is a statue of a lion. You can all agree that's a statue of a lion, right? The way that we know this is a statue of a lion is because our vital life essence matches that one's vital life essence, and we're able to see them. Or this has the form of the lion that our minds and our spirit can comprehend. That was the original thought. We know what it is because we have a connection with it. So this is how early taxonomists began to think. Let's just classify things based on how we recognize them. You start off, this is an early tree where they looked at just animals. Now we're not just looking at man and beast. Now we're separating out the animals and saying, well, some of them have red blood, and some of them have no red blood. It's red blood to things like fish, birds, lizards, mammals. Then we looked at the non-red-blooded things, all the other things that move. We said some have hard bodies and soft bodies. We've chosen We've elevated that particular category above the others. And then hard bodies are insects, soft bodies are things like shellfish or no shellfish. Where would worms fall in this? Soft body, no shell? Is that where you put them? They have red blood, so would you put them over here? Yeah, they do. Some of them don't, so some might be over here and some might be over there. So you start to see issues. Taxonomy got really, it got confusing and they got into the weeds. Today, there's a huge modern significance to speciation. We can create organisms. We can patent organisms. There's one particular group of organisms. It's called Agrobacterium. Agrobacterium is a type of bacteria that is a natural genetic engineer. It can alter a plant's genome and insert new genes into it. The reason that's so important is because it is really, really hard to genetically modify a eukaryote. It's really hard to modify you or plants. It takes a lot of work to get something to survive. But these bacteria, Agrobacterium, they can do it naturally, and it is really easy to engineer them. So if you can engineer the bacteria infects the plant, and the plant gets whatever gene you want it to have. It was a huge revolution in plant genetics. Here's the deal. The company that discovered this process was able to patent the process using Agrobacterium tumefaciens, the type of bacteria. Any experiment that's done that creates a product using that bacteria has to pay that company money. So, how do you make money now? You find a new bacteria that can do it. Well, they found a new bacteria. It's called Agrobacterium rhizobium. So now we got two ways of doing it. But wait, say the biotechnicians who do this. What's the difference between Agrobacterium rhizobium, Agrobacterium tumefaciens, and, I don't know, me genetically manipulating a bacteria until it's just different enough? And now, I've got my own bacteria that I can do. Now I don't have to pay royalties to anybody. Now I get the royalties. This is billion-dollar industries we're talking about, all based on, can you define what a species is? It's insane. This is my work up here. This is kind of fun. These are my glow-in-the-dark strawberries. Yeah, I know, right? Because I thought, what does the world need right now? Glow-in-the-dark strawberries. Okay, truth is I didn't think that. Truth is you use this glow-in-the-dark technology to show that a method works. My goal with this was strawberry nutrigenomics. We could add new nutrients into strawberries so that they could be grown in places where people have nutrient deficiencies and easily help the population. That was cool. It worked. I was really surprised. All right, so start taking some notes if you haven't started already. This is where we're getting into the weeds. Every species is set apart by some distinct characteristics, and we talked about a few. Their functions. We talked about what they look like, but there are a few others. Reproductive isolation, for instance. Molecular features, their ecology, where do they live? And how they're related to each other as far as evolution goes. Now, I know you're going to want to scribble everything down super fast. I'll tell you, I'm going to give you slides on each of these, one by one, going into depth. First off, you can separate out a species based on its morphological traits, what it looks like. This is based purely on physical traits. If you look at a group of fish, and in this fish you have lots of different ones. How would you start sorting these? You, the taxonomist. What would you do for a picture like this? Color, right? You look at it and you're like, well, there are red ones and yellow ones, stripy ones, and you start sorting them by color first. Then what do? Size, probably, right? Big ones, little ones. Could you do it just the opposite way? Start by size and then go by color. Both are equally valid. You are the scientist who gets to make that call. Heck, if you played Angry Birds, because I don't think anyone plays Angry Birds anymore, because it's just like they saturated that market. But it's the idea that you have different colored birds, different shaped birds. They can do all sorts. You can sort them into different ways. Which one came first? Which one? How are they related to each other? Do you do it by shape? You got that stupid triangle bird. You can do it by beak size. Some are giant beaks, some are tiny beaks. You can do it by color. There's all sorts of ways to sort things. You, as the taxonomist, get to make that call. You could separate them out by reproductive isolation. You figure out the nature of the population based on that population's ability to reproduce. Interbreed successfully. I believe we talked about the zebroid, otherwise known as the zonkey, or zorse. It's amazing the word, the names we came up for these. I always prefer zebroid. When you take a horse and a donkey, when you take a zebra and a donkey and you make them together, you get a zebroid. I'm sorry, you get a horse and a zebra, you put them together, you get a zorse? Okay, anyways. How about a horse and a donkey? We'll talk about those. You guys know them. You take a horse and a donkey, you put them together, what do you get? A mule. The mule itself is sterile. Yeah, you can have a reproductive success, but that offspring is not viable, so that would not be considered, those two would then be considered separate species. You can absolutely sort things by reproductive isolation. A duck and a crocodile don't mate successfully. It's going to be messy. You take a duck, you take a crocodile, you put them together. What happens? Crocodile eats the duck. Even if they fell madly in love and tried to mate, they couldn't successfully do it. They are two separate species. You and a gorilla, you tried to mate, you could not do it. Physically, you probably could, but as far as viability goes, you could not produce offspring. So that's another way of separating out species, by reproductive success. You can look at molecular features. This is where everyone wants to go now. If you look at the DNA, there are going to be changes in the DNA. And the more changes there are in the DNA, the more likely they are to be separate species. So you could establish what a species is based on a % change in the genome. Humans and chimpanzees are about 3% different from each other. 3%, that's it. Tiny, this is a fraction. Yet we are separate species. Humans are about 1% different from each other, so that gives you some ideas. And it's not even things that you would expect, like, everyone's like, oh, it's our skin tone and everything. No, we're 1% different in all sorts of other stuff. How your body processes things, the individual mutations in your genome. You could look at ecological factors. The environment they grow in, where they forage for food, where they prefer to mate, where they prefer to live. You've got some primates that live in trees, and you've got some that live on the ground. Those are two distinct groups. If I was to take fruit flies and have some that mate on bananas and some that mate on mangoes, because fruit flies mate in their food, you would have a banana-loving species and a mango-loving species. They may fly past each other, but they're not going to mate with each other. So they're different species. You could look at evolutionary relationships based on fossil evidence, establishing evolutionary pathways to say that these two organisms diverged from a single common ancestor. This is a pretty well trot out example, the glyptodont and the armadillo. The glyptodont is an armored rat about the size of a VW bug. It lived in South America for a while, migrated to North America, and over time we get the armadillo. So those are all of our relationships we're looking at. We're looking at morphological, evolutionary, ecological, molecular, and there's the one I really like, reproductive. Those are all ways to separate out species. And we're going to find as we look at animals throughout this course, animals, plants, bacteria, all of these have problems, and it's maddening. Okay, so now we hit Darwin, right? We have Wallace and Darwin. Both guys come along about the same time, and they said, natural selection's happening. Well, natural selection is going to be based really, really heavily in reproduction. You're creating new species based on their ability to successfully reproduce. So they came up with that at about the same time. Both had very lustrous beards.